Hey everyone, Elizabeth here. The Last Laugh delivers stories that leave you speechless. If you're here for it, hit subscribe and let's go.
My grandfather used to say that the land remembers everything even when the people on it forget. He said it standing at the fence line of his Kerr County property, boots dusty, one hand resting on a cedar post he'd set himself 30 years before. I was 9 years old, sitting on the top rail watching the hill country light turn the cedar and live oak gold. I didn't fully understand what he meant then. I understand it completely now. His name was Raymond Cole Whitfield. Not the same Cole as the estate attorney, just one of those Texas coincidences that makes you believe the state has a sense of humor. He built his ranch from 40 acres and a livestock loan in 1974. By the time he passed at 81, it was 412 acres, a 4-bedroom ranch house, a restored guest cabin, 2 functioning stock ponds, and a cattle operation that had been leased to the same neighboring family for 11 years. The appraised value at the time of his death was $4.1 million. That number appeared in his will, the one my brother Tyler had apparently been helping him update for the better part of 3 years. I found out about those updates the same way I found out about most things in my family. Too late and by accident. My name is Madison Whitfield. I'm 34 years old. I'm a licensed structural engineer with a firm based in San Antonio, and for the past 6 years I have also been the quiet, behind-the-scenes co-manager of my grandfather's property. The person who arranged the lease renewals, coordinated the annual AG exemption filings, handled the insurance claims after the 2021 freeze damaged 2 sections of the south fence line, and drove the 2 hours to Kerrville every other month to check that everything was still standing. Tyler is 38. He lives in Austin, 45 minutes closer to the ranch than I do, though he visited it perhaps twice a year. He is handsome in the way that gets you hired and doesn't get you fired, and he has spent his adult life being the son our family talked about at dinner. He married well, sold a software startup for a modest amount in 2019, and has since been what he describes as consulting, and what I would describe as recreating. Our parents divorced when I was 11 and Tyler was 15. Dad moved to Houston. Mom rebuilt herself slowly and with tremendous quiet dignity in a small house in Boerne, 20 minutes from the ranch. Grandpa Ray was the connective tissue, the person both of us drove toward on holidays, the person whose kitchen table was the only place where the whole family still sat in the same room without it feeling like litigation. Tyler understood early that proximity to Grandpa Ray was a form of currency. He made himself useful in visible ways. He drove Grandpa to doctor's appointments in the last 2 years, coordinated the Christmas dinners and was present, loudly, performatively present, at every gathering that the rest of the family would remember and retell. He called Grandpa the old man, with an affection that landed differently depending on who was listening. I was the one who called the insurance adjuster at 6 a.m. on a February morning when a pipe burst in the guest cabin. I was the one who drove out in the sleet to meet the repair contractor because Grandpa's knees made it hard for him to walk the property in winter. I was the one who sat with him for 3 hours on a Tuesday in March 2020, when the world had gone strange and quiet and he wanted to talk about what the land meant, and who it should go to and what he was afraid of. That Tuesday is where this story actually starts. Grandpa Ray had been watching Tyler more carefully than Tyler realized. He didn't say it cruelly. He wasn't a man who talked about his grandchildren with cruelty. But he had noticed things over the years that he carried without discussing. The way Tyler had borrowed money twice and repaid it once. The way Tyler's visits often coincided with moments when the property's financial records were accessible. The way Tyler had begun in 2019, gently steering Grandpa toward a particular attorney for estate planning. An attorney Tyler had recommended. An attorney whose office I later confirmed was in the same building as a firm Tyler had done business with. Grandpa Ray wasn't suspicious by nature. But he was observant. And he had grown up in a county where land disputes between families were their own genre of tragedy, passed down like bad weather. That Tuesday we sat on the porch with coffee and he told me he'd been thinking about the quit-claim deed process. He'd done his own research, old-fashioned, methodical, the way he did everything, and he understood that a properly executed, notarized and counter-recorded quit-claim deed transferring property to a named individual could not be undone by a subsequent will. He had spoken to a different attorney, one I had never met and Tyler had never recommended. He asked me if I would accept it. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment because it matters. I didn't feel triumph. I felt afraid. Afraid of what it would mean for the family, Afraid of Tyler's reaction. Afraid of the responsibility of 400 acres and everything it represented. I told Grandpa that. I told him I was scared and I didn't want the land to become something that split the family beyond repair. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Baby, it already has been split. I'm just deciding who holds the pieces." We signed the paperwork 6 weeks later, in April 2020. The deed was notarized by a Kerr County notary, witnessed by 2 people unconnected to either of us, and recorded with the Kerr County Clerk's office on April 22, 2020. I drove home that afternoon and didn't tell a single person. Not my mother. Not my best friend Renata, who knew nearly everything else about my life. Not anyone. Grandpa asked me to keep it quiet while he was alive. He didn't want the years he had left to be poisoned by it. I understood. I kept my word. He passed 18 months later, in October 2021, from a stroke that came on a Sunday morning and took him by Thursday. I was with him on Wednesday night. Tyler arrived Thursday morning 40 minutes after. Our mother sat in the corner of the hospital room and held Grandpa's hand and didn't speak for a very long time after the doctor came in. I cried in my car for an hour. Then I called Renata. Then I called the Kerr County Property Tax Office to ensure his records were updated appropriately. I did it the same afternoon because that is the kind of person I am, and because Grandpa Ray taught me that honoring someone means doing the unglamorous work of making sure things continue correctly after they're gone. The will reading was scheduled for 3 weeks after the funeral. Tyler had been in contact with the estate attorney, the one he'd originally arranged, and had been CC'd on all communications. I received my notification by mail, standard formal language, no warmth. In the weeks between the funeral and the reading, Tyler was busy. He called our mother twice to discuss how things would be handled. He had a conversation with our Aunt Deborah, Dad's sister, who had always preferred Tyler, in which he apparently outlined his plans for the property, including a potential sale to a development group that had been approaching landowners in the county. He texted me once, "Just so you know, Grandpa and I talked about the estate extensively. He knew I'd take care of it." I read the text and set my phone face down on my desk. Renata, who had moved from Austin to San Antonio the year before and had become my closest daily confidant, noticed the change in me. We had dinner at her apartment 2 weeks before the reading, and she asked me directly what was happening. "Something's going to be very uncomfortable in a few weeks," I told her. Define uncomfortable. Tyler is going to find out that the ranch doesn't belong to him. In front of the whole family. Renata put her fork down. "Madison, how long have you known this?" "Since April 2020. She stared at me. Then she started laughing, not unkindly, the way she laughs when something is so much bigger than she expected that laughing is the only reasonable response. "You've been sitting on this for a year and a half?" Grandpa asked me to. "And you just did that? You just carried it?" He asked me to. She shook her head slowly. "You are the most disciplined person I have ever met, and I mean that as a compliment and a concern." I smiled. It was the first time I genuinely smiled in 3 weeks. "I might need you there. At the reading." "Try to stop me," she said. The morning of the will reading, I dressed carefully. Not to perform, I want to be clear about that. I dress the way I dress before a site inspection where I know something structural is wrong and I need to be taken seriously when I say so. Dark slacks, a charcoal blazer, good boots. I pulled my hair back. I drove to Kerrville alone, 2 hours of hill country highway, and I thought about Grandpa Ray the entire drive. Not about the land, not about the deed, but about him. The smell of his coffee. The way he called me baby, even when I was 30 years old and had a professional license and a firm that paid me well. The cedar posts. The fence line. The land that remembers. I arrived at the attorney's office. Marcus Cole, Estate Law, downtown Kerrville. 7 minutes early. My mother was already there, sitting in the waiting area with her hands folded. She looked tired. I kissed her cheek and sat beside her, and we didn't need to say much. Tyler arrived 4 minutes later with his wife, Stephanie, and our Aunt Deborah. He was wearing what I recognized as his important occasion look. Pressed shirt, sport coat. A confidence that read as casual because he had been practicing it for years. He clapped me on the shoulder when he came in. "Madison." He said my name the way people say a word they consider settled. "Tyler," I said. We were called into the conference room a few minutes later. Mr. Cole, 50s, reading glasses, the calm effect of someone who had delivered difficult news in this room enough times to have built a personal methodology for it, arranged his papers and waited for everyone to settle. Tyler sat at the center of the table, with Stephanie beside him and Aunt Deborah to his right. My mother sat across from him. I sat beside my mother and I placed my own folder, the one I had carried in from my car, the one that had been sitting in my fireproof safe at home since May 2020, on the table in front of me. Face down. Nobody asked what was in it. Mr. Cole began reading. The will was, in fact, exactly what Tyler had described. Grandpa Ray had updated it in 2019, with Tyler's recommended attorney, a detail that became relevant later, and the language was clear. The ranch property, the house, the outbuildings, the livestock lease income and the financial accounts associated with the estate were designated to go to Tyler Allen Whitfield, firstborn grandchild. There was a small bequest to my mother. A sum to Aunt Deborah. A note about some personal items, the woodworking tools, the old photographs, that were to be divided as the family sees fit. And then a single line designating that Madison Renee Whitfield receive the original 1974 survey map and whatever personal items she has already chosen. Tyler leaned back in his chair. He let the silence sit for exactly as long as it needed to for maximum effect. The will is clear, he said. The ranch, the house, the accounts, all of it goes to me. He looked at me directly and there was something in his expression that wasn't just satisfaction. It was the pleasure of a long-held belief confirmed. Madison, Grandpa knew you'd just waste it. My mother made a small, controlled sound. Aunt Deborah said nothing but nodded slightly. Stephanie looked at her hands. The room had the particular quiet of people deciding how to react to something they're not sure they should react to. I smiled. I looked at Mr. Cole. Mr. Cole, I said, would you like to tell them or should I? The estate attorney went very still. He had known, I would later understand, since approximately 3 days before this meeting, when his paralegal doing routine pre-reading preparation had run a property records search and found a deed that did not match the will. He had spent those 3 days verifying. He had not yet called Tyler. He had, however, looked at me when I walked in with my folder and made a calculation. He cleared his throat. There appears to be a recorded quitclaim deed predating this will by 4 years. Tyler's chair scraped back. Predating it how? His voice was still controlled, but something had shifted underneath it. The sound of a man who has been standing on ground he believed was solid and has just felt it move. Mr. Cole slid a document across the table. It was a certified copy pulled directly from the Kerr County Clerk's records. The kind you can request for $12 and that carries the county seal and a file date. The date on it was April 22, 2020. This deed, Mr. Cole said carefully, transferred ownership of the property, the full 412 acres, the structures, the water rights, to Madison Renee Whitfield in fee simple effective on that date. He paused. A properly recorded quit-claim deed of this nature under Texas property law cannot be superseded by a subsequently executed will. The will controls assets the decedent owned at the time of death. As of April 2020, the ranch was no longer among those assets. The room was silent in a way that had a texture to it. Tyler looked at the document. He looked at me. I watched him process it in real time. The sequence of comprehension, then disbelief, then anger, then the first instinct to find a reframe that made this something other than what it was. This isn't, he started. It's recorded with Kerr County, I said. Has been for 4 years. Grandpa didn't, he wouldn't have. He did. I opened my folder. Inside were 3 items. A copy of the original notarized deed with all signatures, a certified copy of the county recording with file stamp, and a letter handwritten in Grandpa Ray's particular block letter printing, dated April 20, 2020, 2 days before the recording. It was addressed to no one in particular. It began, I am of sound mind and this is what I want. I slid it across to Mr. Cole. He read the first 3 lines and set it down without finishing it. Grandpa wrote a letter explaining his decision, I said. It's dated before the deed was filed. The notary on the original deed and both witnesses are available to provide affidavits if needed. Tyler started screaming. Not screaming in the way of someone in physical pain. Screaming in the way of someone whose constructed version of reality has just been publicly and irrevocably dismantled. He stood up from his chair. He said my name twice at volume in a way that made his wife put her hand on his arm. He said the word impossible, as though repetition could make it load-bearing. He told Mr. Cole that this had to be some kind of forgery, that he'd be calling his own attorney, that this would be challenged, that Grandpa had been clearly manipulated in 2020. Aunt Deborah had gone very quiet. My mother, beside me, had placed her hand over mine on the table and was holding it, and when I glanced at her I saw that she was crying, not from sadness I thought, but from the release of something she had been carrying that I hadn't known she was carrying. I want to contest this, Tyler said, sitting back down because standing had not helped. His voice had dropped, which was somehow worse. I want to contest this in court. Mr. Cole looked at him with the patience of a man who has explained things many times. You're welcome to consult an attorney about that option. I would note that under Texas law, a properly executed and recorded deed transfer from a grantor who was of sound mind and who executed the transfer more than 18 months before his death, with appropriate witnesses and notarization, faces a very high bar to contest. He paused, particularly when accompanied by a contemporaneous letter expressing intent. He was alone with her, Tyler said. He was looking at me. She pressured him. She manipulated a sick old man. He was not sick in April 2020, I said. He was 80 years old and entirely clear-minded, and you can speak to his primary care physician and to both witnesses if you have doubts about that. Kept my voice level. I had practiced keeping my voice level. He made a decision. He asked me not to discuss it while he was alive. I honored that. That's the complete story. That's not. Tyler. My mother's voice, quiet and not unkind. Stop. He looked at her. She shook her head, not in disagreement, not in judgment, but with the exhaustion of a woman who had watched this dynamic for decades and had reached the end of her willingness to perform surprise at it. Stephanie had not spoken once. What happened in the 3 weeks after the will reading was not a clean cascade. I want to be accurate about that because the truth of these situations is never as clean as the satisfaction of the confrontation scene might suggest. Tyler did contact his own attorney. The attorney's assessment, delivered privately but shared with me eventually through mutual family channels, was the same as Mr. Cole's. The deed was sound, the contest would be expensive and almost certainly unsuccessful, and the letter of intent from a man who had lived another 18 months after signing it and made no move to rescind it would be difficult to argue against. Tyler did not file a contest. He called me twice. I let both calls go to voicemail. The messages were not screaming. They were something sadder. A man trying to find a framing in which he had not lost, circling without landing. The ranch had other complications. In preparing the estate documentation, Mr. Cole's office flagged a discrepancy in the livestock lease records. Specifically, that the lease income for 2019 and 2020, which should have been deposited directly into Grandpa Ray's account, showed a gap of approximately $31,000. The neighboring family who leased the land confirmed they had made all payments in full on time, to an account they had been directed to by Tyler, who had been handling it in 2019 while helping Grandpa organize his affairs. I did not file a police report. This is a decision I am still not entirely at peace with. Renata argued I should. My own attorney, who I retained in the month following the reading, told me I had a clear civil claim and possibly a criminal one. What I decided in the end was to document it, fully and thoroughly, with statements from the neighboring family and the bank records, and to tell Tyler in a text message I drafted and sent in November 2021, that I had documented it and that he should be aware I had documented it. He did not respond. Whether that was the right call I still don't know. $31,000 is not a small amount. But filing criminal charges against your brother in a family where your mother is still trying to exist without permanent fracture is not a clean decision. There are costs to the clean decision that don't appear in the story version of events. What I do know is that he repaid $31,000 to the estate account within 45 days of my text. Quietly. Without acknowledgement. Aunt Deborah stopped calling me. This I expected. She and Tyler had always run on the same frequency, and there was nothing in this outcome that she could reframe into something comfortable, so she chose distance instead. I let her have the distance. It costs less than I would have thought, which is its own kind of sadness. My mother and I had dinner together in December, 6 weeks after the reading, at a diner in Bernie that we'd been going to since I was a teenager. She ordered her usual chicken fried steak, which she eats twice a year and considers an occasion, And she told me that she had known in some way she couldn't fully articulate, that Grandpa Ray had done something like this. Not the specifics. But she had seen how he watched Tyler in the last few years, the particular quality of his attention, and she had understood that he was someone arriving at a conclusion. Were you angry? I asked her. That he didn't tell you? No, she said. She looked out the window at the parking lot, the flat December light. He did what he needed to do to protect what he built. Same as I did back then. She meant the divorce, the years of rebuilding. Same as you're doing. I thought about that for a long time afterward. The ranch is mine now. Legally, formally, without ambiguity. I drive out every other month still, same as I always did, though now I walk the fence lines differently. I'm in the process of updating the lease agreement with the neighboring family. The Garcias, third generation, people whose relationship with this land predates Tyler's interest in it by decades. I've had 2 conversations with a conservancy organization about a permanent easement on the southern section, which would protect the creek corridor from development in perpetuity and provide a tax benefit I can use. I have not sold the ranch. I will not sell the ranch. There were moments in the weeks after the reading when people assumed I would, that the whole story was really a story about money, about winning an asset, about the score. It's not. The ranch is the last place I can stand at a fence line and feel close to a man who taught me that honoring someone means doing the unglamorous work. I'm not ready to give that up for any number, and I may never be. Renata came out in January, first time she'd seen the property. We sat on the porch in the late afternoon, the winter light doing what the winter light does in the hill country, flattening and gilding everything at once, and she asked me how I felt. I thought about it for a while before I answered. I feel like I did what I was supposed to do, I said. I kept my word to him. I let him make his decision without interfering. I showed up when he needed me to show up, and I kept showing up after. I looked out at the cedar and the live oak. I don't feel like I won. I feel like I finished something. Do you wish Tyler knew that? She asked. That it wasn't about beating him? I think it would have been true when I was 25, I said. I'm not sure it's true anymore. He knows what he did with that lease money. He knows who he was choosing to be those last few years. I don't think the explanation changes anything for him, and I've stopped needing it to. She nodded. The cedar posts along the south fence are the original ones, the ones Grandpa Ray set in the 1970s. Some of them have held and some have been replaced over the decades, and the ones that remain are gray and weathered in a way that looks like permanence, though I know from structural work that nothing holds forever without maintenance. I have a list of repairs for this spring. Fence line, south section. 2 posts that need replacing. A section of the guest cabin roof that took damage in last year's hailstorm. The Stock Pond's eastern levee needs regrading before the summer rains. The land remembers everything. I've started to understand what he meant by that now. It doesn't mean the land is sentimental. It means the land carries what happened on it in its structure. In the fence lines and the drainage patterns and the soil compaction and the places where cedar has grown up in the old cattle paths. It carries the record of every decision. You can read it if you know how to look. I know how to look. He taught me. That's the only inheritance that was never in dispute.